for your wonderful lecture. I thought it was very accessible,
Good.
very easy for us to understand, and somewhat thought-provoking. And I have to say that I've been a listener of your lecture since 1990s, and I'm indebted to you for my financial security and prosperity as well as intellectually. And of course, I'm profoundly indebted to Ayn Rand for her ideas. The ideas that took me into a journey that I would not otherwise have taken. So let me start by asking you how you discovered Ayn Rand and how her ideas, her writings, her work have influenced you in your life.
Sure. So I was, I don't know if you know, but I was born and raised in Israel in the 60s and 70s. And Israel at the time was a very socialist economy and very collectivistic, tribal, you could say, right? The Jewish people, the state of Israel was the top value that we were educated around. Everything in our culture, the songs, the stories, was focused on making you part of the tribe, making you part of the collective. And I bought in completely. I was a socialist, I was a collectivist, I believed in it all. And I was talking to a friend one day, and we were discussing economics and politics, and he was, for the first time, said I'd known him, he was making these arguments from a free market, kind of capitalist perspective. And I looked at him and I said, where are you getting this nonsense from? Because I thought it was complete nonsense. And he said, you got to read this book. And he handed me a copy of Atlas Shrugged, which I spent the next few months reading. And it took me a long time.
Next few months?
Yes, it took me a long time because I argued with Ayn Rand on every page of the book.
Every page of the book.
I disagreed. I didn't accept it. I threw the book on the wall.
You mean literally?
Yeah.
Figuratively?
Both, I think. And by the end of the book, she won. And I won, right? Win-win. She'd convinced me. Not that I understood everything. Not that I got it, right? But I understood enough to know that everything I'd believed to that point was wrong. Didn't make sense. There was no reason for it. Why should I live for the collective? Why was the tribe more important than me? You have one life. One opportunity at this. Why not make the most of it? Why not live the best life that you can live? Wherever that happens to be, with whatever people happen to be. Why is family more important than friends? Why shouldn't you choose your culture or choose the country you live in? So this, of course, had profound impact on everything that I did from that point on. First of all, I went on to try to read everything she wrote and try to really understand, and it took many years to fully understand. I'm still learning. I still don't understand everything. But it led me to kind of the choices in the friends that I made. It led me to decisions about, rather than following the path that the family wanted, to choosing my own path. And it led me to leave Israel. Because one of the things that I decided was, instead of living for the tribe, for the group, I said, I've got one life. Where would be the best place in the world to live this one life? Where could I make the most of this one life? And to me, that was America, at least in 1987. That was the obvious choice. I'm not as sure today. But certainly in 1987, America was still this beacon of freedom, this beacon of opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I left Israel and moved to the United States. I've never regretted it. Since.
What would you call the state of the United States, state of America right now?
It's depressing, partially because it's election season, so all these people are talking, and it's better that they all shut up. The United States is losing what makes it special. And what is it that makes it special? In a sense, what makes America special, what makes the United States special, is what makes the West. And I talk about the West not in terms of geography, but the set of ideas that make the West special. So, in my view, America is the greatest achievement, political achievement, of a particular ideological tradition. And that ideological tradition is the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is two ideas, I believe. Two ideas define the Enlightenment, and therefore, in my view, define what it means to say there's a West. And define what it means to be America. And the two ideas are, one, the primacy of reason. Reason as the means of knowing the world. That is a discovery made, if you will, by Aristotle and the Greeks, rediscovered in the Renaissance and flowered during the 18th century, during the Enlightenment. What's the other name for the Enlightenment? Anybody know what the other name for the Enlightenment is? The age of reason. And there's a reason for that, right? It's the age of reason because reason is placed above all else. Religion and faith are challenged during that period. For the first time, really, since the Greeks, religion and faith are challenged. And of course, reason manifests itself in the 18th century in the scientific revolution. The greatest advocate, maybe, for the Enlightenment is Newton, right? The great scientist. And the second concept that is always the twin of reason. Because who reasons? I talked about this a little bit in my talk. Who reasons? The individual reasons. Only the individual reasons. Groups don't reason. So when reason rises to the top, so does individualism. And this is the era of John Locke, the era of individual rights, the era of individual liberty, and the crowning achievement of the era is the establishment of the United States of America. Because it is the culmination of all of that. The founding fathers of America are all men of reason and individualism. And Thomas Jefferson Memorial, there's a quote from Thomas Jefferson which says something like, I don't remember it exactly, bring everything before reason. Even the existence of God must be brought before reason. Right? Reason is the supreme. And of course, in the Declaration of Independence, government is established in order to protect the individual, the rights of the individual. Now, that concept of reason and individualism has slowly been diminishing in the West and at the same time in the United States.
Okay, so it's still diminishing.
Yes.
On the decline. Oh,
yes.
Okay.
The decline started really right after the establishment of America with the German philosophies of Kant and Hegel and the rest of the German Romantic tradition, which destroys reason. They undercut reason. The whole idea of the Romantic philosophies was to elevate emotion above reason. And you get the culmination of that in Nietzsche, which is the will, which is important.
So you're saying that entrepreneurial heroes are flourishing despite the decline of reason?
Well, are they flourishing any more than they flourished 100 years ago? I don't think so.
Oh.
We just know the entrepreneurs today. But think about what it meant, what kind of innovation we had 100 years ago, and compare it. As much as I love Silicon Valley, think about 100, 120 years ago, the kind of innovations we made in the West, right? Again, the West as an idea, not the West as a geography. We went from horse and buggy to train, automobile, airplane. Huge. We went from kerosene lamps to electricity. Huge. Now, with all due respect to the internet, with all due respect to the iPhone, and to every little, to Facebook and Twitter, that's not going from the horse to the automobile. That's not going flying. That's not going to electricity. So if you think about the amount of innovation and the quality of innovation and the extent of innovation, it was much greater 100, 120 years ago. And the other thing was, back then, everything was on the table. You could innovate in everything. Today, the scope of innovation is very narrow. We can innovate in technology, a little bit in telecommunications, But what was the last really big innovation in air travel, in airplanes? We basically, the Boeing 787, which is the latest Boeing, is not that different than the Boeing 727. I mean, it's a little bit more comfortable, it's a little bigger, but it's the same technology. Right? The last technological innovation in air travel was the Concorde. I don't know how many of you remember the Concorde, right? And we grounded it. Yeah. I mean, if you read science fiction books in the 1950s, they thought that by 2000, we will be colonizing Mars. Our cars would be floating on air. We still have 4 wheels, and we have the same internal combustion engine that was invented 120 years ago. So a lot of industries today are not innovating. The train system, I mean, you guys have great trains. But those huge leaps of innovation are gone. And I would argue, I think Ayn Rand would argue, is that all those industries where you have government regulations, government controls, those are the places you don't get innovation. And government has so far left technology alone, so all the innovative energy has gone into there, but it's limited. The scope is limited. So I don't think there's any more innovation today than there was 50 years ago. I think there's less, and it's limited to a bigger scope. But because it's limited, we know all the names, because it's the only guys we have. Right?
I see.
100 years ago, there was innovation everywhere. There was innovation in Michigan and in New York and in California and in Ohio. I mean, if you look at the map of the United States and all the different places, every one of those big cities was a center of innovation. Today, it's a center, we call that center of the United States the Rust Belt. Why is it the Rust Belt? Because it's rusted. It's falling apart.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view. I never thought of that. It used to be more ubiquitous,
Yes.
more commonplace.
Now it's Silicon Valley, one
Right,
place.
Right.
America used to be the land of innovation, the land of entrepreneurs. Today, 2014, and I hate to be negative, but 2014 in America, more companies went bankrupt than were started for the first time since the 1970s. And that's a very, very unusual. It's only happened a few times in American history that more companies go out of business than are created. That's not a good sign. It's not a good sign.
I realize that there are people in the audience who are familiar with or even knowledgeable about business innovation and the recent economy. And why don't we open ourselves to a few questions
Sure,
from
absolutely.
the floor? Yeah.
Questions? Don't be shy.
I'd like to ask not about the economy exactly, but about Ayn Rand's context of philosophy. Can you explain a little bit what made her unique in the history of philosophy?
So the question is, what made Ayn Rand unique in the history of philosophy? So I think the first thing that is unique about Ayn Rand, at least in modern philosophy, is that Ayn Rand was what we called a system builder. She had a comprehensive philosophy. She had something to say about metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and even aesthetics, even the arts. Very few philosophers in all of human history have had that. Plato, Aristotle, Immanuel Kant, and that's pretty much it in terms of having a comprehensive philosophy about everything. She also innovated in every single one of these. She had something new to say about metaphysics, about epistemology, about ethics, about politics, about aesthetics. She, I think, is the first philosopher to have the system integrated around the idea of reality as existing independent of consciousness. Reality is what it is. The things out there are there. And the idea that we can comprehend that reality using our reason. And that really is the theme that goes throughout her philosophy. Because you think about her ethiks is about using our reason to enhance our own life. And she's the first philosopher since Aristotle to say that the purpose of ethics is not to sacrifice to others, but to lead a flourishing, successful life for ourselves. All philosophy, almost all philosophy, with maybe the acceptance of Spinoza, all philosophers since Aristotle, again with the exception of Spinoza, all focused on morality as living for others in one way or another, sacrificing. Virtue was about how you would sacrifice to other people and who to sacrifice to. Rand is the first one since Aristotle to really bring back the focus on self, on how to make yourself, virtues and values for the purpose of living the best life one can live. Human flourishing, human success. And that's really the core of her ethics, reality of her philosophy. Reality, reason, egoism or self-interest. Right? Everything else is derivative from that. Does that capture what you were looking for? Good.
I'm from
Oh, we've got a microphone. We want
Yeah.
you to speak into the mic. And by the way, feel free to ask the question in Japanese and you will translate if you're more comfortable doing that.
日本語でも質問してください。
I'm from a financial sector investment firm, and before asking a question, I really appreciate your speech, and maybe productivity and independence must be the virtues which I personally have to pursue. But now the question is, when we think about the issue from a society level, don't we really need to adjust the unfairness, or whether we don't need a redistribution, because that's the way we have to get the certain size of a universe of potential customers, or we will get the potential innovators in the future. That's why, for example, Bill Gates set up his new initiative of philanthropy and distributing big money to Africa, or solving the healthcare issue. So I just wonder, what is your thought, or what's Ayn Rand's thoughts on that?
So as I understand the question, don't we need to redistribute some wealth in order to create consumers, create demand for our products, to create future innovators, and just because it's fair? So the question is, let me start with the last one. Let me start with fairness, because that's a moral issue, and then we'll get to the creating consumers, which is more an economic issue. What is fair? So people produce at different levels. Some people change the world, and some people make enough to be able to feed themselves, and some people don't work at all and don't produce anything. Why is it fair to take from those who've created so much and give to those who've created less? So to me, fairness, which today is defined as equality, why is it defined as equality? Shouldn't fairness mean getting what you deserve? And when it comes to production, when it comes to material values, isn't what you deserve what you produce? What you contribute, in a sense, to production? So to me, it's not fair to take from people by force, because that's what we do when we distribute, to give to other people. Now, if Bill Gates wants to help people, he has a right, it's his money. But that's not the same as the state redistributing wealth, taking from some by force and giving to others. To me, that's not fair. Force, coercion is not fair.
So if individuals voluntarily, out of their own will, redistribute their wealth for the betterment of society, that's a good thing.
It could be a good thing, but it depends on why they're doing it. Unfortunately, I think many do it today out of a sense of guilt. You know, in America, people talk about giving back. Giving back. Now, giving back makes an assumption that you take something. But what did Bill Gates take? The world is not a zero sum, right? We have an assumption built into this thinking that there's a pie, and Bill Gates took a big piece of the pie, so we get a small piece of the pie. But no, Bill Gates built a pie. He created a pie, and by making that pie, we got some pieces that we wouldn't have got if Bill Gates hadn't made the pie. We've already benefited from Bill Gates. So it's not that he took anything, he's already given us a huge amount. So giving back, to me, suggests that people feel guilty somehow, as if they, by making money, have made you poor. But no, Bill Gates has made us richer. Even the poorest person on the planet is richer because of Bill Gates, because of Microsoft and the networking effect and what computers have done in the world. So to me, fairness demands that we leave people alone. And if people want to give and help, they should do it because they believe in it, because it's somehow consistent with their self-interest, with their flourishing, with their life. That it's in pursuit of values they believe in. And then they should give. And I suspect Bill Gates is not doing it because of that. And why do I suspect it? Bill Gates lives in Seattle. Right? In Seattle has a lot of problems. I don't know if you've ever heard, there's a lot of homeless people in Seattle. There are a lot of poor people in Seattle. Not poor like Africa, but still relative. And yet Bill Gates doesn't invest in Seattle. He doesn't use his philanthropy to help people in Seattle. He chooses the place furthest away in the world that he can think of, Africa, to help people over there. Why? Because he doesn't want anybody to suspect he might be doing it for self-interest. If he did it in Seattle, people would say, you're trying to make your life better by changing the place you live in. So you're going far, far away, as far away as you can imagine. Tell people you don't know it all. So I suspect he's motivated by guilt. Indeed, if you listen to him, it's clear that he is. So I'm not too happy about it. But he's considered a hero because of it. I consider him a hero because of Microsoft, because of what he built and what he created. And he changed more lives at Microsoft than he ever will through his philanthropy. Right? So that's the fairness question, although we could talk a lot about the fairness question. I want to say something about the economic question, because there's a massive fallacy that we need to spur consumption. We need to get people to consume. Your prime minister here in Japan, Abe, and all his economic advisors believe in this idea in economics. We need to create consumption. Right? The Chinese are now trying to shift their economy from an investment economy to consumption economy. America is driven by consumption. I don't know if there are any economists in the room here. This is complete and utter nonsense economically. And this is why Japan, in my view, is stagnating economically, because you believe in this and you're trying to do the wrong things. Think about it this way. In order to consume, what do you have to do first? You have to produce so that somebody pays you for that production, so you have money so you can go and consume. Even if you're receiving a check from the government, where does the government get the money to give you so you can go and consume? It has to take it from somebody who's produced something. So at best, consumption can only be 50% of the economy, because every dollar that is consumed has to be first produced. A dollar represents production, or yen represents production. But that's not even true, because production is multiple layered. And everything that's consumed has to be produced by somebody. And there are many more steps in production than on consumption. Consumption is one step. Buy the ice cream, eat the ice cream gone. But making the ice cream is a multiple step. There's a cow somewhere. It has to be milked. The milk has to be transported somewhere. The milk has to be converted into ice cream. Think of all the jobs. Think of all the steps. All the production that has to happen to make one piece of ice cream so you can make it disappear like that. Consumption is destruction. Consumption is destruction. So if you want to spur economic growth, if you want economic success, you don't want, consumption happens anyway, right? It's not hard. Just put any person in a mall, they're going to consume. Consumption is not hard. If I know that I have the money to consume. What's important is jobs. What's important is production. What's important is entrepreneurship. What's important is innovation. If you want a thriving economy, what you need is to spur investment, to spur saving, but saving not that sits like in Japan in government bonds, right? You have 220% debt to GDP, right? The highest in the world, or at least in the productive world, if you will. It's sitting in government debt, right? And government only consumes, government doesn't produce. What you want is those savings going into production, going into investment, going into job creation. What you want is to shrink government and spur the private sector to invest and produce, and then people will consume because they'll know they've got a job, they know there's a future, they'll know they've got income, and consumption is easy. I mean, who doesn't know how to consume? You don't have to think too hard about consumption, but production, that's hard. But that's all economic policy, and I don't believe government should have any economic policy because I think government should be separated from economics. But to the extent we have a government that's involved in the economy today, it should be geared towards production, not about consumption. So you should be reducing business taxes and eliminating regulations and allowing for flexible labor markets and for allowing for flexible financial markets. That's what will drive. What you need is hostile takeovers, and you need the breaking up of your conglomerates. You need freedom so that the markets will reshape towards production, towards greater profit making, towards greater wealth creation, and consumption will take care of itself. But when you consume, production doesn't take care of itself.
So the whole economic policy is based on a mistaken assumption.
Yes, it's basically everybody in the world today is a Keynesian, and Keynes was wrong from beginning to end, and completely wrong. And it's interesting it's interesting why we're all Keynesians. In 1972, I think it was 72, 73, something around there, Richard Nixon said, we're all Keynesians now. And he went on to destroy much of the US economy as a consequence of everybody being Keynesian. And we got stagflation. Inflation was stagnation, which contradicts Keynes. According to Keynes, you couldn't have both inflation and stagnation at the same time. So in the 1980s, nobody was a Keynesian. Everybody was Thatcher and Reagan's supply side. Supply side means production side, and everything went away. And now
Reaganomics.
Well, Reaganomics, isn't an army. There isn't really such a thing as Reaganomics. But, there was basically the idea of Keynes is dead. And in the 1980s, we declared Keynes is dead. And now, he's back and alive. And why is that? This is my theory. So who knows? If it's mine, if it's Ayn Rand, it's pretty good. But if it's mine, it's a little dubious. But my theory is this: Keynes is the only economist to justify a big state. So whenever the state wants to grow and take on more power, they adopt Keynes. They could adopt Marx, but Marx is dangerous, right? Marx is associated with communism, and that has failed. So Keynes is like, he's okay, right? He's an Englishman. He wasn't a commie, didn't believe in the state owning the means of production, but he still believes in a big state. So whenever the statists get into power, they use Keynes to justify taking over big chunks of the economy. And this is what happened in 2008 in the United States. When the United States got into financial trouble, Bush and Paulson and they immediately went, they wanted more power. And they used Keynes in order to gain that power. And this is true over and over and over again. You see these cycles. So yes, all of Japanese economic policy, much of American policy, much of European economic policy is based on a wrong economy. I mean, Hayek proved Keynes wrong 2 to 3 years after Keynes wrote his book. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. We are doomed to making the same mistakes over and over. You know, Einstein, he said, you know what the definition of insanity is, according to Einstein? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, in Japan, since 1991, right, so the last 24 years, your governments have done the same thing over and over and over again, and they keep expecting it to work. It's never worked, so they stimulate the economy again. They do big infrastructure projects again and again and again, and it never works. And they do it again, and they think this time it'll work. In other words, the economic policy of Japan and the United States is insane, according to Einstein.
Now that we know where we are because of all these reasons, any prediction into the future?
Given that we're insane, how can you predict the future? Insane people do insane things. I mean, I believe that unless some very fundamental ideas change, we are doomed to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And the fundamental ideas are a change, a moral change in the culture.
Moral change
Yes.
in the culture.
So economics won't change. We will not adopt different economics until we adopt a different ethical code.
Something fundamental has to change.
Something very fundamental. So as long as we regard self-interest as suspicious, as long as we think the profit motive is shady, that profit and wealth, we don't like them because they're reflections of self-interest, and we associate self-interest with these negative activities of lying, cheating, stealing, and so on. As long as that happens, we will not free up our economy, because what does freeing up the economy mean? It means placing more economic power, if you will, in the hands of entrepreneurs, in the hands of businessmen, in the hands of the profit seekers. But if we're suspicious of them, we want to control it. We want to, so we have to stop being collectivists. And we have to start being individualists. The reason capitalism thrived in the 19th century is not because they had great economists. They didn't. The economists were, Adam Smith is good, but you know what? Hayek and von Mises are even better. It's not because of great economists. It's because of those two ideas I mentioned earlier. Because of respect for reason and individualism. That's why we had capitalism. Freedom and capitalism are consequences of fundamental ideas, not of economic ideas. That's why, in my belief, is that it's not about teaching economics. It's about changing our view of very fundamental ideas in the world about how individuals should act in the world. And that's why it's hard. That's why it's so difficult.
Thank you. Let's hear another question from them.
すみません、ありがとうございました。稼ぐ美徳っていうテーマだったんですけど、さっきの話だと自分の人生で最高に生きることに頭を使った人が、今稼いでる。で、みんなそういう人生を送りたいと思っているけども、そういうものを追い求めない人と、追い求めた結果成功する人がいると。で、そこの違いの思考だったり思想は何かっていうのを。
What exactly is the difference between these two types of people?
So, you're making an assumption that everybody wants to make the best of their life. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Or at least I don't think that a lot of people think about what will make the best of their lives, because we're not taught to do that. We're not taught to think about ourselves. So my mother, when I was growing up, told me, think of yourself last. Think of other people first.
That's what most of us here in Japan are taught too.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Think of others first. Think of yourself last. I taught my children, think, big emphasis on think, about yourself. Think about what kind of human being you want to be. Think about what career you want to pursue. Think about what life you want to live. But if we don't teach that to people, they don't know how to do it. So they have all these obligations to family and to society and to the community that they think are that they've been taught are the most important things for them. And they're busy doing that. And very few people stop and say, I want to live a great life. How do I do that? Now, what happens at some point in America, I don't know about here, is they feel unhappy. So they go to the bookstore and they find self-help books, right? And there's a huge section of self-help books. But none of the self-help books actually teach you to think about your life. They're very superficial. Do this, do that. They don't go to the core of it. They don't challenge the fundamental moral question of what is the purpose of your life. And I'm saying the purpose of your life is to flourish, is to live a great life, is to be happy. But nobody, we take happiness, yeah, we all want to be happy, but nobody takes it seriously. The science of happiness. How do we become happy? What are the steps to being happy? And nobody challenges the idea that morality, so we live in this conflict. We want to be happy. We have all these self-help books that teach us supposedly how to be happy. But morally, we're supposed to sacrifice. And all our moral heroes are people who sacrifice for other people. They weren't happy. Have you ever seen a painting of a saint with a smile on their face? You ever seen a happy saint? No, the definition of a saint is somebody who suffered. They usually have arrows sticking in all over the place, or they're crucified or something, right? At least, again, in the West, right? So how do you combine that view of life, of sacrifice as good, with I want to be happy? Then you get guilt, and you get conflict, and you get this ripping apart, right? What Ayn Rand, I think, provides is really a science to how to be successful. She says, no, you shouldn't sacrifice. Pain, suffering, that's not what life is about. It's not about the arrows. It's not about being crucified. It's about living. It's about enjoying life. It's about finding the things that really enhance your life. And then people say, well, what about lying and stealing and cheating? Doesn't that make don't people become rich by lying, stealing, and cheating? And she says, no. Just look at liars, people who lie all the time, people who cheat all the time. They don't have happy lives. They might have a lot of money, but they don't have happy lives. They can't live with themselves. Some of them go to jail. That's not very happy.
So when you teach your children to think about themselves first, it's not the same as putting your self-interest ahead of others?
Well, in a sense, it's putting your self-interest ahead of others. I care about myself more than I care about you guys. That's reality. I care about me more than I care about you. And you care about you more than you care about me. And this is the test I always give. And this is a test that works even for the most altruistic, collectivistic people. I say, 2 kids are drowning. One of them's yours, one of them's the neighbor's. Who do you save first? Your own. Everybody saves their own child first. And I'm proud of that. Most people feel guilty about it. Because according to the morality out there, you should sacrifice. You should save the neighbor's kid and let your own kid drown. But no, we save our own kid first. Because the fact is, we do, at some deep level, care about ourselves more. But then we feel guilty about it. I say, why the guilt? But that's different than saying, in order to pursue my self-interest, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to sacrifice you. I don't care about you. No. Ayn Rand said, you shouldn't sacrifice to other people, and you shouldn't ask other people to sacrifice for you. The way to deal with other people is what she called the trader principle. What you want in life are win-win relationships.
Did you say trader principle?
Trader.
Trader.
From trading. Win-win. So think about a trade. When I buy an iPhone, I pay, $300 for this. How much is it worth to me? More than 300. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered. So I'm benefiting from, I give up $300, I get something that's worth more than $300. How much is it worth to Apple? Less than $300. They're making a profit. So they won, and I won. Win-win relationship. Trade is win-win. At least we enter trades with the intention of win-win. Sometimes we make a mistake, right? But we enter the trade with a win-win intention. All human relationships should be like that. Your love relationship, right? Friendship, love. You want it to be win-win. If one party is sacrificing to the other, not going to last very long. And love, think about love. Love is the most self-interested of all emotions. Why do you love somebody? Because they make you feel good. Because they're a projection of your values. And yet, we're taught that love is selfless. Really? So imagine the day before your wedding. You go up to your spouse-to-be and you say, I'm not getting anything out of this. This is completely selfless. This is a massive act of sacrifice. I'm marrying you as a sacrifice. I mean, she'd slap you in the face and walk away. Right? The whole point of getting married is because I love you. You make me feel great. Right?
So the very concept of selfless love is a misguided one.
Yes, love. There is no such thing as selfless love. You can be selfless and you can love. You can't combine the two. And being selfless is hard. We need to be trained to be selfless. But that's what our educational system does. It tries to train us to be
selfless. So the educational
selfless.
system, the whole society is teaching us to be more selfless,
Why?
less selfish.
Who has an interest in us being selfless? Who has an interest in us sacrificing? Who has an interest in us caring more about other people than ourselves? Yeah, but those who don't want to produce don't have power. What's that? Whoever demands a sacrifice. And who demands a sacrifice? The guys who have the power. The chief of the tribe. The witch doctor of the tribe. Right? And this is the gimmick, right? You should live for the tribe, for the public good, for the common interest. And I say, but I don't know what the public good is. What do you mean by the common? Don't worry. I, as head of the tribe, I channel, I commune with the spirits to tell you what the common good is. I know what's good for the tribe, so follow my orders. Altruism, the idea of living for the sake of other people. The idea of the primacy of the group over the individuals are the way in which we are controlled by the people who want to control us, by the power lusters, by the dictators, by the witch doctors, the witch doctor being the religious leaders, because they are the only ones who know what true is, what right is, and then we need to follow. And God forbid you be an individual because you might challenge them. And this is why they always burn at the stake the innovators. They always destroy the independent thinkers because they are a challenge to their authority. Individualism, this is why individualism comes out of reason, because the idea is that it's not the Platonic philosopher king who reasons, right? According to Plato, only some people, the philosophers, know the truth. We all live in a cave. We only see shadows. We don't see reality as it really is. So we need the guidance of the experts, the guidance of the witch doctors to tell us how to live. And that serves the interest of the witch doctors. It serves the interest of the philosopher kings or the kings. Right? What reason does, what Aristotle does, is he shatters that. He says we all have reason. We all see reality as it is. We don't live in the cave. We don't see shadows. We're seeing the light. Every one of us can reason. So we don't need the witch doctor. We don't need the king. We can live our own lives. We can choose our own values. Suddenly we're individualists. So Aristotle shatters the collectivism of Plato. There's a wonderful book called The Cave and the Light. The Cave and the Light, published a couple of years ago, which shows a point that Ayn Rand made a long time ago. But this is the first book to really illustrate it, if you will. It shows that all of the history of Europe and the West is really a battle between the ideas of Plato and the ideas of Aristotle. The ideas of collectivism and the idea of the philosopher king, the idea of the abstract ideas that only some people commune with, and the ideas of reason and individualism. That is the struggle. That has always been the struggle. And Ayn Rand, of course, is on this.
Who is the author of the book?
You know, do you remember his name? Arthur Herman. Arthur Herman. Very good book. Highly recommended because it shows this contrast. And it actually has a whole section on Ayn Rand in the book where he places Ayn Rand on the Aristotle side, on the side of reason and individualism, where she belongs. But that's the battle. That's the battle we're still living. That's the battle, in a sense, we will always live. What we hope is that Aristotle wins. When he does, you get a renaissance and enlightenment.
Thank you.
I don't think I need a microphone.
Oh, he's got a big voice.
Oh,
Yeah,
up
but we're
there.
taping
they
it,
do.
so.
Yes. This question is related to the gentleman's question over there, which I think what he was getting at was the point of a social safety net, and I would argue that your point about the leaders having that power to control us, that they are allowed and granted that power because there are a tremendous amount of people who are looking to people who are going to help them, in many cases, give them things.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a social safety net, which in eons past was provided by charity. The government wasn't giving people things. But the concept of the social safety net controlled by a central government is, I believe, so entrenched in our modern society and our modern thinking that it is virtually impossible to think of it going away. However, there is a constant struggle. How much of a safety net is necessary versus how much should we take away and force the independence that you talk about, people being independent, supporting themselves or their family, helping those in, or friends or church, charities helping those that need help, rather than the government providing.
Sure.
What do you think is the best way for those of us that believe the social safety net has become too strong and too dominant and has reduced basically all of our standard of living? What's the best way for us to explain and get the word out that yes, a safety net is necessary? We would prefer the church does it, but if the government does it, it should be smaller. How can we help convince people and help them understand that they don't need the government to provide everything?
So before I answer that question, let me challenge an assumption you've made, because I actually don't agree with it. The assumption is that the powers to be get their power from the people who want wealth distributed in their direction. And this is kind of the Mitt Romney, I don't know if you follow American politics, Mitt Romney made this 49% comment. 49% of Americans get stuff from the government, so they're going to vote for the left, right? They're going to vote for more. Well, that's not reality. Reality is that rich people vote for the left as much as poor people vote for the left. That educated people vote for the left in America more than uneducated people. It's actually people who are successful. Actually, it used to be the opposite. It used to be that educated people voted for more freedom, if you will, for Republicans. Today, over 50% of people with a college education vote Democratic. So I don't think that's true. I think they're motivated. People are motivated by guilt as much as they're motivated by I want stuff. And a lot of people who are getting stuff from the government would rather not get stuff from the government, want to vote for freedom. And this is, I think, the key. So I'm against the safety net, a government-sponsored safety net. I believe that any safety net should be voluntary. And I think you have to fight for that. You have to fight against the idea of a coercive safety net. Because if you're just fighting to shrink the safety net, you're not fighting on principle. What's the principle? Giving somebody $1,000 is too much, but 400 is okay? Why? Why not? It's like the minimum wage, right? In America today. It's $7, they want to make it $15. I would say, why not make it $100? I mean, if the minimum wage works, why not make it $100? Everybody can be rich. Of course, then they realize that that can be, right? You have to fight for no minimum wage, because otherwise it's a slippery slope. There's no reason not to make it higher. There's no once you accept the safety net, you lose control over how big it's going to be. So you have to make the case that a safety net is bad for two reasons. One, it's coercive. And we have to make a case that coercion is evil. Coercion is bad. Taking a gun, sticking it at somebody's back and saying, give me your money, is wrong. It's wrong when an individual does it in a back alley in the street, and it's wrong when the government does it by pulling the money out of your paycheck without you even having a chance to get it.
You're in the middle of your answering the question, but I have to interrupt. Some people believe that coercion is a necessary evil to provide the sufficiency.
Yes.
Yeah.
I say there is no such thing as necessary evils. Evil is evil is evil. Just because you want it, just because they need it, doesn't make it necessary. Evil is evil. Just the fact that we use necessary evil suggests that something's wrong here, right? Evil should never be necessary. Only good should be necessary. So coercion is wrong. I give you an easy example, a simple concrete to remember. Let's say my neighbor is sick, or his child is sick, make it more emotional. His child is sick, and he doesn't have enough money for the treatment. Dying. The child is dying. Doesn't have enough money for the treatment. He only has two options. I have money, let's say. He can come to me and ask me to help. And I might help. But I might.
You might not.
But I might not. Maybe my children need the money right now. Maybe I don't have any money to spare. Maybe this neighbor is a really, really bad guy. There are many, many reasons why I would not help. There are also many, many reasons why I would. But it's my choice. He can ask for my help. The second alternative is he can pull a gun out and force me to help. Now, if he literally did that, we would say he's a crook, he's a thief. Even though the cause might be good, we would say, that's wrong. You can't pull out a gun and take my money. And we would put him in jail. But this is, now he pulls a trick. It's a mind trick, right? He goes to all the neighbors and he says, I want his money. Let's vote on it. And we vote. And 51% of the neighbors say, yes, we should take his money. And now when he pulls the gun at me and takes my money away, now it's okay. We took something that's clearly immoral, clearly wrong, clearly identifiable as theft, and by voting, turned it into something that's okay.
So democracy is actually used or abused for illegitimate reasons.
Democracy has always been abused to violate the rights of an individual in the name of the majority. Think back again to Greece. Think of Socrates. Everybody know Socrates, the great Greek philosopher?
Everyone.
Walked around town and used to ask young people questions, right? The dialogues. If you've studied Plato, you know the dialogues. And he was corrupting the youth. He was challenging the ideas of the elders. He was challenging religion. So the people in Athens said, ooh, this is bad. We don't want Socrates challenging conventional wisdom. We don't want Socrates challenging religion. We need to silence Socrates. So they got together and they voted to silence Socrates. Now, what's the only way you could silence a philosopher like Socrates? By killing him. So they voted to kill him. Right? So that's democracy. Full democracy is when the majority is controlling the individual. Where the majority imposes itself on the minority. Now let me give the second reason. I still owe you another reason to argue against. So one is that coercion is evil. And I haven't really justified that coercion is evil fully. There's a lot of literature on that by Ayn Rand. It's the fact that coercion is the enemy of reason, but we don't have time to get into the whole argument. The second argument is that when you give people money, particularly when it's unconditional, like the welfare state, you're destroying their lives. It goes back to my point earlier about where we get self-esteem.
So by offering help, you're not helping them. You're
not helping them unless you're helping them as a one-time thing in an emergency, which is what the old safety net used to do. When the safety net is voluntary, it's not perpetual. You don't live off of charity anymore. Charity is there for emergencies. Charity is there for a while something bad has happened and to get you back on your feet. It's not to be perpetual support. When you give somebody perpetual support, what happens? You disincentivize them from work. And if they don't work, they never have the sense of taking care of themselves. They never make something for themselves. They're dependent. They're not independent. They never get to use their mind to solve a problem. They're just sitting in couch potatoes, watching television, getting checks from the government. So you deny them pride. You deny them self-esteem. You're destroying them. The recipient of welfare is the victim of welfare. Welfare is a way to institutionalize people into unhappiness. It institutionalizes them into poverty. Opportunities are taken away from them. It's bad for the recipient. If you care about people, I care about people. I care about any person who's ambitious, who wants to make a better life for themselves. Giving them a check doesn't help them. It makes them worse. Giving them opportunities, giving them a job, that helps them. That gives them real opportunities. So I'll give you an example that a friend of ours, John Allison, uses, which is actually out of his own personal experience. His grandfather, John Allison is the CEO of one of the largest financial institutions in the United States, or was. He's retired now. 10th largest bank in the United States financial. He was the CEO for many, many years. He built the bank up to become this big. So a very successful individual. And he tells a story about his grandfather. His grandfather was a bricklayer, very poor, worked with his hands, laid bricks, made very little money. But he made money. He fed his family. He came back to a little home, and the food was simple, but it was food he was providing. So he had an immense sense of pride that whatever it is that he was providing, he was providing. He was capable of taking care of his family in this world at whatever level he could, providing his children with an education, and maybe one of his children or one of his grandchildren would be the CEO of a great company one day. But that sense of pride that you took care of yourself and your family, you deny that when you give people welfare. And that's the way you destroy their lives. So if you care about the poor, or at least those among the poor who are ambitious, you should hate welfare. You should hate the safety net. It doesn't help them, it destroys them.
So you're totally against the very idea of coercive social safety net or welfare, because it destroys productiveness and perpetuates dependency.
Yes, and I would say that even if it was voluntary,
But
it was the same thing, it was perpetual, I would be against it. I would be for charity that helps people in emergencies, or that helps people who really can't take care of themselves. They're sick, or they were born with some lack of capacity that makes it impossible to take care of themselves. But that's a fraction of a percent. Most people can take care of themselves. And then they need help to get back on their feet when something bad happens to them. That's the kind of charity that is helpful to human beings.
Thank you.
And in the back.
Thank you for your time and coming today. And I have a few questions, actually. One is, I don't know if you've touched the topic, but the one is the concept of equality of opportunity. I think evenness of opportunity. Everyone has the right to actually develop themselves. But some people, like Africa people, they don't have maybe the capital or whatever to actually develop or flourish themselves. So how does I think this is kind of part of the safety network too, but how does Ayn Rand thinks, and how do you think about this topic? And
Let me take the questions one at a time because I can't remember.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I'm getting old. It's true. I think equality of opportunity is a real misconception. There's no such thing. We can't equate opportunities. Right? Some of us go to good schools and have well-connected parents, and and others don't. And the only way to try to make it a little bit more equal is by denying some people opportunity for the sake of other people. And then again, you're back to coercion. So what I'm for is a different type of equality. I think the only type of equality that means anything, that is real. Anytime you think we want equality of X, and you know that equality of X is impossible, metaphysically impossible because we're all different, something's wrong with the statement equality of X. What equality is possible? The equality that the founding fathers talk about in the Declaration of Independence, where all men are created equal. That equality means equality of freedom, equality of rights, equality before the law, but where the law is a law that protects rights. We're all born free. We're all born with the right to pursue our lives free of coercion. No matter what color skin we have, no matter what ethnic background we have, no matter what man, woman, we're all born free. That's the only equality that exists. Now, a political system that respects that preserves that equality of freedom, that equality of rights, is also, I believe, a political system that maximizes opportunities. Rather than equate opportunities, maximizes opportunities for everybody. So if you're a poor kid born in a free society, you have more opportunities than a poor kid born in a socialist, equal opportunity society, a society trying to equate opportunities. So I want a political system that maximizes opportunity, doesn't equate it. So when I think of Africa, I want to maximize opportunities for people in Africa. How do you do that? By making them free. How do you provide capital to Africans? There's a wonderful book by Hernando de Soto. Hernando de Soto, a great Peruvian economist, an economist from Peru, called Capital Ideas. And this is what he says. He says the problem in Latin America and the problem in Africa of poverty partially is because people lack capital. But they don't really lack capital. What they lack is legal recognition of the capital that they have. So they don't have title over their home. They don't have title over the land that they have. But that is just government creating laws that protect rights. Government doing away with a feudal system that still exists in part of Latin America and part of Africa. But if we recognize a farmer's right to the land that he's farmed for generations, suddenly they have capital. And when they have capital, they have opportunities. So the way to solve the problem is to establish the rule of law. And what I mean by the rule of law is a rule of law that protects individual rights. All the other problems go away.
Thank you. So I think this is, I have another question, sorry. Is it okay?
Go ahead.
Is about, like, when you talk about, I'm free to do whatever I do, what I want, and then, for example, there are some common social kind of problems, like, for example, unemployment and education, and this, will economically create some, increase the crime rates, for example. So if socially you want to decrease the crime rates because you want your child to be safe, I think like just thinking alone on yourself, and if you want to pay or no whatever, this is safe network. It's linked. It's kind of linked, but it's. I just wanted to know about how Ayn Rand think about this need and how people should take care. And the last question is, how did she think or you think about Japan? How this kind of social economy actually growth such as the level that it is right now, and it's not capitalism, it was like socialism from my view.
Sure.
And I think
It's a mixed economy.
It's a mixed economy like everything. Okay, see, you asked two questions. I can't remember the first one. One word about the first one. What was it? Yeah, social problems. You mentioned education and employment. Crime. So the government's job, in my view, its only job is to protect me from criminals. So the government should do its job. There's also no evidence in the literature of a correlation between crime rates and unemployment, for example. So we live today, certainly in Japan, but I would say really globally, we live today in the safest, least crime-ridden period in human history. There have never been fewer homicides, murders. There have never been fewer rapes. There have never been fewer deaths by war than in all of human history. This is the safest time ever. And nobody knows, it's not clear why. I mean, I have a theory, but it's not clear why. It's certainly not related to unemployment or employment, right? So Ayn Rand would say there are no such things as social problems, right? Individuals are unemployed, and they're much more likely to be unemployed the bigger the state is. It's fascinating, but capitalism, when industry is left alone, it always, everywhere it's tried, creates more jobs than there are people. Think United States during the 19th century. In order to keep the economy going, they had to import millions and millions and millions of people in order to keep it going. Indeed, even the United States today, in spite of all the mixed economy, we still need millions of immigrants. I mean, partially because some Americans won't do certain jobs. They'd rather collect their welfare checks than actually go to work. But, Silicon Valley, we talked about Silicon Valley during the talk. I lived there in the 1990s and dabbled very badly in some venture capital and stuff like that. Half the startups in Silicon Valley are started by immigrants. Indians, Chinese, Israelis, Swedes, half. So, it's self-generating. Capitalism generates more jobs than there are people, and there's actually an economic reason for that. People are scarce, and therefore you innovate in order to reduce your dependency on people. So all these problems are really eliminated by freedom. And those that are not, like crime, that's the job of the government. The one job of the government, the only job of the government, is to rid ourselves of that, is to police, it's to create that. So there is this notion that I hear sometimes from people is we should vote for statism because if we don't, the poor will rise up and there'll be a revolution against the rich. And I hear a lot of that. Rich people always say this to me. Oh, I want a big safety net because otherwise if we just leave poor people alone, there'll be a revolution. But if you look at human history, it's never happened in a free country. True, in France in the 18th century, but that's because there was a king. And what did Marie Antoinette say? Let them eat cake. She was so detached from the reality, right?
All brioche, actually.
But in a free economy where people rise up and they go down, and there's never been a revolution of the peasants, right? There was a revolution in Russia because there was a czar, but not because there was freedom. Okay, so that's the first question. The second question, very quickly, about Japan. I mean, the fact is that countries do well economically to the extent that you allow them to be free. Post-World War II, you had a constitution that allowed for quite a bit of individual freedom. The Japanese constitution is the only constitution in the entire world that has the statement that individuals have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which MacArthur put into that, which doesn't even exist in the American Constitution, but exists in your Constitution. So you have a strong element of freedom and of individual rights, even if it's not completely absorbed by the culture. It's there in the legal code to some extent, so that you've had a lot of freedom, and therefore you've done well economically. To the extent that you reduce that freedom, you stagnate. And that's what happened to some extent over the last 20-something years. And the same is true everywhere. When you allow the Chinese a little bit of freedom, boom, they explode with economic growth. When you allow Thailand a little bit of freedom, they create economic growth. When you reject it, they shrink. So it's all connected to how much. Imagine how rich you would be here in Japan if you really were free economically, if the government really stepped back and allowed you to produce and allowed you to Schumpeter's creative destruction. If that were allowed in Japan, wow, you would be so rich. It's harder for us to imagine how rich. We're so rich today in spite of the mixed economy, not because of it.
I realize we only have a few minutes left.
I think
That'll
we've got
be
a
the
question in the back there.
last question.
Yeah, I know that the time is almost up, so let me ask you a quick question. My question is about the speculation in the financial market, or what do you think of people who are playing money game? Because I know that the investors like Midas Milligan in Atlas Shrugged are very important because they help create values by investing money on the promising projects and productive entrepreneur or great innovation ideas. But some people invest money just for money. So what do you think of that kind of people?
Great
So,
question.
I mean, the fact is that people who invest money without contribute anything, so dumb money, just to try to speculate, lose it. So they don't survive in the financial markets. The financial markets are very survival of the fittest focused. And what does it mean to be the fittest? It means that you're adding value. Now, how do you add value, let's say, in the stock market? You're not doing like Midas Mulligan, giving money to entrepreneurs. You're just exchanging in the stock market. But somebody like Warren Buffett adds value. What is the value he adds? It's the knowledge of what the real value of the company is. And when he buys it, he's affecting the price. And by affecting the price, he's making the price signal more efficient, which affects the allocation of capital throughout the economy. So financial markets, in my view, are the most important markets in an economy, because they signal not just whether entrepreneur X gets money or entrepreneur Y gets money. They signal which industry should get money or capital and which shouldn't. Which industries are on the rise and which industries are on the decline. They signal and therefore determine the allocation of capital throughout an entire economy. So if you're a hedge fund, people say, oh, hedge funds are not productive. No, hedge funds are incredibly productive because they're trying to evaluate and determine whether the price signal is accurate. And they're trying to make it more accurate by including the information that they have that nobody else has into the price. They're long some stocks and they're short other stocks. And shorting is terrific. I love shorts because the shorts are saying this stock is overvalued. People think it's more valuable than it is. And if they're wrong, they're going to lose a lot of money. I mean, you can lose, I don't know how much you guys know about finance, but when you short a stock, you borrow it and sell it, you can lose an infinite amount. You can only double your money, but you can lose an infinite amount. I can speak from experience. I've lost an infinite amount shorting, or close to an infinite amount, a lot of money. So I'll give you, I once shorted a stock with, it was somebody else's money, $250,000, and I lost $1 million on that investment. That's pretty crazy. An investment of 250 and you lose $1 million. That's what happens with the short. So what these people are doing is they're confident that something's overvalued. And by doing that, they're pushing it down. So imagine you running, let's say it's 1910, and you run the best buggy company. You know what a buggy is? It's what the horses pulled, right? You run the best buggy company in the world, and your stock is way up there. And I run a hedge fund, and I notice Ford and all these other guys building automobiles, and I'm saying, you're not going to survive. But you don't know it because you haven't noticed those guys. And I short your stock. And by shorting your stock, I'm starting to drive it down. And maybe it causes you as the CEO of the company to say, what's going on? Why is my stock going down? And you look around, oh, there's an automobile company. I better retool. I better look for a different job, right? And the bankers are looking at it and saying, why is the stock going down? Oh, there's an automobile business there. Maybe I shouldn't lend these guys any more money. Maybe I should shift my resources. So the stock price signals to the world, this is a dying industry. This is an industry on the rise. So it's an incredibly productive activity, incredibly important activity. And I admire, I mean, my view is, in a capitalist economy, the most productive and the most important people are the financiers, because they make possible everything else. Steve Jobs can't start Apple without Midas Mulligan giving him that first check. And there was a Midas Mulligan, right? Giving him that first capital. You can't imagine a biotech company that for 10 years doesn't have a product. It's a classical biotech company, 10 years. Somebody is willing to risk their capital for 10 years, might never get a return, might go to zero. And yet all these workers, the lab workers, the scientists, all get paid in the meantime. They're not willing to take the risk. They get paid. So without the capitalist, the scientists don't get paid, the janitors don't get paid, the workers don't get paid. The capitalist makes it all happen. This is why it's called capitalism, because it's the core. It's what it means. The financier is the engine of capitalism, or I like to call it the heart of capitalism, and the circulatory system of capitalism. It circulates the blood, the capital. That's the financial system. So it's incredibly productive. But people who are not productive but are just playing finance, they lose their money very quickly. It's just like playing roulette. You might win once, you might win twice, but if you keep playing, you'll be wiped out.
Thank you, Yaron.
Thank you all. Thanks for staying up so late.
Come again to Tokyo.
Be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brook. これにて講演会稼ぐ美徳とアメリカの起業家精神を終了とさせていただきます。皆様、ヤロンブルクさん、田村陽一さんにもう一度大きな拍手をお願いいたします。ヤロンさん